have to get our mind right. Right? Not saying that it's wrong, just saying that if we're gonna say it's a good morning, um, I like to bring up topics that's been crossed and share with me to really share with everybody on this call. And so today, one of the things that I needed just after a busy week, after a revelation, realizing over the weekend that I've been super busy, had a lot of moving parts. One of the things that um, we like to have, we don't get a do-over in life, but we are able to do a reset, and that is to reset, our expectations, reset our approach, reset our strategy. Sometimes you want to start over and do it again, and every day gives us a day to reset. Last week I was talking about how we have our four capitals, our health, our relationships, our actual financial, and then time and energy. And at some point, one of those four gets drained. It could be your capital, it could be your relationships, it could be your health, it could be your time and energy. And so, after you go through a turbulent time, how do you reset? And for us as traders, since this is a trading call, I wanted to go through a 5 day mindset reset. Um, you know, Considering that we have 5 trading days come up, the Friday is July 31st, going into August. It's a perfect time to you know remind ourselves. One, I have a life system, a lifestyle trading system that I want to go over quickly on this call, but then also the the reset and what it looks like. And so in trading, right, a lot of us, we know how to trade. We've had successful trades. We may have been trading for years. We have our strategy. The trading part is not the problem. Sometimes the problem is what we have on the schedule, the things that we cannot move, the things that we cannot change. Right? Some people have appointments coming up. They have doctor's appointments. They have birthdays. They have weddings. You have bills that you're thinking about. Right? So you have all these outside conditions, and being able to set aside 30 minutes or hour, to trade, um, is one of the ways that we reset. It is like, when can we sit down and identify the times that we have available? Now, I wanted to meet with someone this weekend, and I scheduled a call for 6 a.m. my time. And they were like, "Man, it's early your time on Saturday." And it was like, well, that's the time that, I feel comfortable, where I know that I'm going to be uninterrupted. Right. And so a lot of times it's not about skill, it's about a structure gap, and recognizing those gaps, right? Recognizing the gaps. You sit down at night, you look at your bills, you look at things you have to pay, right? And you create a plan to map out, how it's going to go down. And when you are just missing a skill, right, that's not really a gap, because you can study and fill that gap. Structure gaps is, things that happen repetitively throughout your life, throughout your month, things that you have to fill. So, like the person on the job, that every day that you have to go to work, so that hour and a half, that 30 minutes that you want to sit down with, that's considering that you have a job, you have a family, you have, activities that you need to do, right? And, the calendar, doesn't say, hold up, you had to open and build this time. It's about, identifying what time that you do have available, and how can you incorporate it, right, while life happens around you. And that's the same thing where my 5 day reset, realizing that, man, I was busy, I was going different places. Now looking at my week, how do I reset and get back on track of having, the time available? And so, for one, the reset isn't about, how much money you make at some time. is measuring how are you able to execute, right? Because you can have 5 days, with a good P&L or a short P&L, but it is the gap, it is the time, it is the execution, right? And so, we have to recognize in trading that a reckless week can still breed profits, right? A disciplined week can still print red. So that's just the math, but that's not the execution, right? How much money you made at the end of the week or not, because is it sustainable and was it on purpose, right? And so producing a written record, whether you can run a repeatable process, that is also part of the 5 day reset, right? And that data is worth more than the money because going forward, every dollar you make will depend on what type of process that you have. So, you know, it's saying that repetition only sticks, when you actually can remember what to do when things go wow, right? So a lot of the training happens and your response is automatic. And so if you can take the time to write it down, not type it in, but write it down. One of the things that, I was actually printing out was a life-size trading drone where it basically can be printed out and you can copy, post in, but the same thing with the PDF, right? Is basically printing it out and then being able to write in the blocks. But other than that, um, right, how does my morning go? If I'm trying to do a mindset reset, if I'm trying to check and see if I have a system, right? I broke it down to a daily 90 for myself, right? And saying that, hey, if I have 30 minutes in pre-market, that is my prep time. The 45 minute, which I like to say for me is an hour, 7:30 to 8:30, that is my execution window. And then at some point during the day, you're gonna have a close, and I need 15 minutes to, identify, am I gonna hold overnight? Am I gonna close it? So, saying that the daily 90, right? 30 minutes to prepare for the market, 45 minutes to execute, 15 minutes to close. That would give you, about 90 minutes in a day. And if you don't have 90 minutes, then it's like, all right, well, we can close it down to 60 minutes. And you close this window down to, maybe 15 minutes for the execution window, or 20 minutes for the execution window, 10 minutes for the um, close. But you have to have, you know, um, from my mindset reset in trading, I would need to at least have 60 minutes, right? And it says cut the window. At the window you're trading, never to prep, right? And never to close. Um, so this is like the equivalent of taking off, right? You need to, before you take off on a plane, you need to have the checklist. You need to go to 30 minutes, right? That's a mandatory. Before you enter in the trade, you need to have a process. And getting out of a trade is also where money is made. So you cannot eliminate that. You cannot just remove the stopping out, remove the taking profits, but you can shorten the execution window if needed. And you also can add more time to any of these windows, right? But you know, this is, a way to look at your, execution period, right? And skip any prep costs you the entire point of the week. So, you can't skip the prep on any day. Before you take a trade, right? The mindset reset is saying that you need to at least have 30 minutes to look at the market, right? This is not the system or the environment where people just get an instant download and know what to trade. A lot of times, if they do this, that means they're taking signals, right? If they do less than 30 minutes in prep, you basically are taking somebody else's trades, which is going to lead to loss of capital, right? Eventually, right? So the honest inventory, if I had to go through 5 days of mindset reset, right, it is, understanding that, am I an operator or am I a tourist? Am I just stopping through, right? The operator executes to produce data, right? And, you know, the tourists, is just hopping in, hopping out. And so most traders don't have an analysis problem, right? Or they don't believe they have an analysis problem. They, it happens in execution, right? We may know that we're looking at IBM. We may know that we're looking at Coinbase. We may know we're looking at any of these that we have on our list going into the week, right? But the actual execution of the trade, right? And a lot of times it happens because you've never written it down. So, the honest inventory, day one, is list your last 3 trades that went wrong. Next to each one, mark a single letter. S if the setup was wrong, or E if the setup was fine and execution broke. Right. And for me personally, right, the execution for me for the last trades that I've taken that I've been wrong on was wrong. Right. Because I broke the execution. I didn't put the stop in, or I didn't take the profits. Right. It was more of I got in to get trades, but I executed wrong. Right. Meaning that there's a reason why. Right. And so the macro read in one sentence before I open the chart, like what is happening in the market, what's my expectations, right? Every idea tracks 4 fields, the ticker, the entry, the stop, and the target. Those are things that, um, just to get you back in. So if you fell off in trading, or you were, breaking the rules, just this exercise here will help you get back to, having that plan and that mindset check. Right. And then also, have you checked off, for the day, what 90 minutes would you have to be available for trading? Right. And then also your maximum daily loss declared in writing. Right. One of the things that I say is I don't like to lose more than 500 per trade. Right. And so, the last couple of trades that I've lost, whether it's Amazon or Coinbase, right? I got some of it back, but having those losses that were bigger than my daily loss that I like to declare in writing, right? And so today's numbers, setup errors versus execution errors. A lot of my things last week were all execution based. I had no problem getting in, but the execution, the failure to stop out, the failure to maintain the daily loss limit, those are all issues, right? Day two, the first 30, right? You say the 45-minute, the active window trading pays out with the 30 minutes deposit, right? That means that 30 minutes pre-market, my preparation, right? If you know, I look at the ones I've already prepared, right? So if I eliminate the impulse trades, that's what day two is about. Every impulse trade you have ever taken came from the same place, a gap in the prep that your brain filled in live. So you abandoned what you prepared for, and you hopped in a trade that was impulse, right? Under pressure with money already on the line. That window is the worst possible environment for a decision, right? And so a lot of people that have been trading the mastermind, they already have some trades that they already think about before the market is even open. That is still considered prep work, right? You had the plan; it didn't come out of the blue, right? And so when it comes down to executing, whether you had the bias or not, you've already gone through it. So for every entry that you consider in taking before the market has happened, you would have a ticker, entry, stop, target, right? And I think yesterday I was showing, um, I was showing pieces of my trading card. Right here. All right, I had the storyboard card yesterday that I was showing on the call. Now he's showing that we have a target, we had the information. So even running a trading plan, right? Making sure they have a target, my stop loss, my ticker, my entry. That is the bare minimum, right? That you want to identify, and then risk on or risk off. right? So if I'm looking at ES right now, I'm saying risk on is above 74.90, right? That's where it gapped up to, um, 74.90 risk on because, right? I'm trading because we had a gap up, they paused the war, supposedly a straight, et cetera. They said if you cannot read the sentence before you look at the chart, your unfinished macro read is how you end up trading someone else's conviction, right? Because you don't even know what the market is doing. And that's where the prep comes in. So do you have completed ideas? Um, and that is a question to ask yourself day two. Day three, the loop hunt, right? You have a good setup with bad results. It's usually diagnostic, not bad luck. Something changed how you felt once your money was in. Today you find the exact place it fires. So sometimes, once we get in the trade and we don't want to get out or we don't want to get stopped out, so you may remove the stop or you may have changed something in your process, and that's called the distracted trade loop, right? And normally it's the same mistake that a person makes. And so on your worst trading day, you ask yourself, what was the stop set before I entered? No, there was no plan. The loss that follows not the market doing, or if yes, keep going. So if you had a stop set before you entered the trade, then you move to the next one. That move to stop after entry, yes, then that's where the loop fired. Right? Write down what you saw, heard, and what made you move it. Right? No, keep going. So this is the loop pump of saying, hey, I'm looking for, what have I done in the trade that broke a rule? Right? Did I add to a position after it moved against me? So am I doubling down on bad positions? Yes, it is the most expensive form. This is where you pay the most, adding to a losing trade, right? Um, right, with adding cost versus what the original shot would have cost, right? If no, you didn't, add to the position, I see or hear something during the trade that was not in my prep, right? That's the next question. Yep. If you did, then name the source, right? And now you close that source during live position. So sometime you'll see me in the back and my TV will be off. I will not add the TV because I'll hear things, right? Instead of sticking to my process of running my own AI, running my own system. So sometime I will hear or see something that will change, right? And that is not part of my process, right? And then did I exit on my plan, target, or hold past it, waiting for more, right? And so this is another loop that I messed up last week, right? I had multiple times to exit coin with profits, and I didn't exit, right? I was waiting for more or waiting for the news to trigger again, and so that is the reset that I had to go through, and a process I had to implement because a lot of my trading last week, because of my schedule or et cetera, or because I broke my rules, it was execution, right? It wasn't a setup. Other people got in, they made money off trades. I had no problem with the planning and preparation. It was all execution based, right? And so day four, the stop stays, right? One was calm and had no money at risk. The others negotiate. When you're negotiating with yourself, move your stop or replace it, right? And so you want to trade small on your reset, right? And you small enough the money does not shut out that you have to do something, right? The only question is whether you can abide by your stop that you wrote before the market opened, right? And then today's gate on day four, I trade my levels, not feelings, not notifications, my levels. The stop I set before I opened it stayed exactly where I set it, right? And I would notice that, last week, a lot of the levels were being broken because of the volatility, and we expect it again this week. So, um, that is part of how you reset yourself in trading, right? And Friday is not for making money back. Friday is for reading the data you spent 4 days generating and telling yourself the truth about it, right? And this is part of a mindset reset. when it comes to trading. So I'm gonna share this document. Um, this is something I'm gonna use, um, for a struggling trader, right? And basically saying that, here's the things we need to check on a daily, right? You take a week out to basically go through your process to get you back on track, right? Which rules followed, which rules broken, and then one change that you're going to implement, on a day-to-day basis, right? And you do that for 5 days, and it will get you back to not running your red lights, not moving your stops, or trading too big, right? And then if you aren't able to complete, 5 days of the prep, if you miss 2 out of 3 days and you didn't have 30 minutes to actually even look at the market, right? That will show up here, right? You only did the prep 1 out of 5 days or 2 out of 5 days, right? What is the rule that I broke most often, right? What does the week tell me about my process that I now know on Monday, right? That is one way that you recover from making bad decisions, right? And then what happens on day 6, on Saturday morning, when we have our tune-up call, this is all part of the mastermind, but I'm just breaking it down into 5 days of, what happens when a trader breaks rules. And then on day 6, they should be able to come on a Saturday tune-up call, right? And talk about what they fix, what broke, what they noticed, right? Nobody fixes a pattern they've been running for years by reading it off a page one time, right? And that's what happens when a person goes through and takes a hot webinar or takes a flash course, right? You know, it has to register, and you actually have to change patterns, and it's repetition, right? And doing it, and then having a reset, right? And so that is one of the challenges that, I say when I'm talking to new guys, they coming in, it's a one-on-one challenge. Some of it is mindset. Some of it is, going through the process of having a process, a pre-market process, intraday process. But they also got to have that time, whether it's 60 minutes. So when I say 60 minutes a day, that's a daily 90 and a daily 60, right? So they have to have at least 60 minutes, and that 30 minutes of prep, is non-negotiable, right? They got to be able to make a call Sunday night, right? They have to be able to go through a process, right? You're not going to be successful um, without having a preparation time, right? It's almost like you younger, you could actually go to the gym and just start working out, right? As you get older, you're going to have 30 minutes of stretch time at some point, right? Your body is not just going to be able to hop in and just go, right? And you have to be willing to run a stretch. You have to be willing to do the prep, right? Have to be willing to have a process before you enter the market, right? And at the end of 6 or 7 days, you have to have accountability, and you have to tell yourself the truth about what happened. So, if I have a week that I broke a lot of rules, or I used excuses, oh man, I was out traveling, I was going to the dentist, right? Or I was had a medical thing, or I had I wanted to see my daughter, whatever excuse I use is like, did I actually follow my process? And it starts with an honest inventory, and then it also starts with hey, do I have a process that I'm not meeting, right? Because I have to measure my money, right? I have to measure my mindset, I have to measure my process. And sometimes that is what the 5 day mindset reset is about. It is about restarting, right? And measuring where did you miss. And so I had this lifestyle trading system that I was gonna go over last week, but of course, I was driving in Arizona during the Wednesday mindset call, right? That I normally have, and it was just telling me that I was busy, but it was part of the, asking yourself before your strategy, before you even start, right? Things you can measure: your energy, your stress, relationship tension, overcommitment, mood, market clarity, financial pressure, day sentiment. This has nothing to do with your strategy, your trading. This has everything to do with the operator, the person that's trading the market. So, these 8 areas, right? It's something that I can measure, right? And if I actually don't have sleep hours, or I'm already past my weekly drawdown, right? It is something to go through on the first step, right? And it's telling me that actually I was building. This is a prototype of something I was building to say that, hey, your problem is not even trading, right? If you measure your energy level or your stress level or your relationship tension, right? All these other areas also impact your trading, right? Your mood and stability, market clarity, financial pressure, right? Some people may have so much financial pressure that they can't even think straight. So, this is letting you know that, you have to do a health, capital, relationship contribution check, right? And of course, speaking the trade before you trade it, right? A daily journal, which, I was just even on a lifestyle, just putting up an Excel spreadsheet and saying, hey, I'm just going to go through these checks, right? This is a lot of checks here. This is everything that was in that's in this document here, all right? And this is things that I wanted to check before the bill. So this is a one pager, right? And I'm still working on it, but I'll actually share that so you guys can see. Um, pull it up real quick. Let me make sure I can try to make sure it's only one page. Uh, we'll go over that on Wednesday, but I'm actually just gonna print the one page out so this way those questions. All right, and it's a good reminder that, right, for some people they don't recognize that it's outside the trading system. My whole my whole thing was last week was outside the actual trading, right? It wasn't that I had the wrong prep, right? It was that I had the lack of time and overcommitment of other things that impacted. So I don't wake up thinking, oh man, I was a bad trader or blah blah blah. It was like, man, I was doing too much, right? And I was overcommitted and I had stress and my mood, and the market clarity, right? Lost time, lost track. So, this is why we had these mindset calls, because every week we were going through different stages of life, right? And we're experiencing different things that sometimes if you don't catch it, you're not aware of it, right? It will impact your trading. It doesn't mean you're a bad trader. It means that you misaligned, you know, um, you had misalignments that was in life in general that you didn't catch. So hopefully this is beneficial. You guys get some jewels out of this. This helps us move forward because even sometimes people say, "Oh man, they yelling at their kids," and there's other things that's going on in their life that have them yelling at the kids. It's not even the kid's fault. Right? The kid is being a kid, right? And sometimes a person is being a person. It's not the trading that's messed up. It is the things that are outside, right? It could be something driving you at work. It could be, an illness that you're worried about. Right? I was doing blood work and lab work, you know, uh, every day, different doctor and getting results back. Right? There's a lot of other stressors that happens, and that is a part of real trading. That sometimes it's not your system, is you set up your prep. Right? I prep all day on Sunday, and then come Monday morning, if I had an argument or something was happening, I need to run outside. It throws off that prep work there, and then you realize that, man, I'm off for the day. Right? It can be something as simple as that. So on that note, I want to give you guys your morning back. I appreciate you guys. It is you're gonna be a volatile week, which is normally good for traders. One of them I'm looking at is Bible right now. All right. On that note, I'll talk to you guys soon.